Act 4, Scene 5. We have just come from Hamlet finishing his final soliloquy, now back to Castle Elsinore, where I suppose Horatio is somehow staying there because his friend has been banished to England. He's trying to persuade Gertrude to speak with Ophelia, and this unnamed minor character named Gentleman speaks of Ophelia's condition, how she's talking about her dad, and she's talking in a pretty crazy kind of way. Apparently, the word of her father's death has reached her, even if people in the castle probably want to keep it hush hush, but secrets don't stay secret for very long, especially in a place with as many people as a castle. Horatio makes some advice to somebody other than Hamlet for once, telling Gertrude that you should probably talk to her, because otherwise she could cause dangerous speculation among the gossips in town. Ophelia enters, and she's off. Let's just put it this way. This is where we start exploring mental illness in a more determined and obvious way, I suppose, in comparison to Hamlet. She's singing these songs of a man, but the man's identity keeps shifting. At some point, it sounds like she's speaking of Hamlet when she speaks of a true love. And then next, she's speaking about somebody who's dead and buried, which may well be Polonius. And she interrupts the queen, who's trying to maybe talk her down or calm her down. And then Claudius arrives, greets her, and she's still speaking rather nonsensically, at least on the surface. Lines 55 through 60, her song shifts to the story of a maid who enters through a chamber door, a maid, but comes out not a maid. It's a little bit of a riddle, but if you think of maid in terms of maiden or unmarried woman or presumably virgin, then the play makes more sense here. The next part turns into a more tragic turn where this maid comes back to the boy she loves and reminds him of the promise he made to wed her, at which point he counters that, I would have married you if you hadn't bedded me. So some of that double standard at play here between men and women. Also, possible interpretation would be that Hamlet has knocked up Ophelia, even though presumably not much time has passed in the course of the play. Ophelia, in some productions, appears here as visibly pregnant, and she could be mourning the ruin and end of that relationship she had with somebody she was hoping to be her husband. Little bit of an ominous note here where Ophelia says that Laertes, her brother, if you remember, the young man who went off back to college in France after lecturing his sister about keeping her virginity, is going to hear about the death of their father, and presumably only bad things can happen of that. The king points out that lots of bad things are happening at once. Polonius has died, Hamlet has been shipped off, the people are muddied and they think unwholesome thoughts and whisper in ways that are probably politically dangerous for him. Again, we see Claudius here using that politician's mind to describe how all of these appearances may affect his prospects. Also, he knows that Laertes is coming. For whatever reason, he describes Laertes coming in secret from France. Apparently, not so much a secret that Claudius doesn't know about it. And on top of that, there are a lot of buzzers, or basically entourage people, who are infecting his ear with word of his dad's murder and turning him towards, I guess, treacherous thoughts toward the crown of Denmark, depending on your point of view. At this point, the queen and king are interrupted by a loud banging sound of the castle doors or gates. Messenger arrives, urging Claudius to retreat or rescue himself because there's a whole mob out there with Laertes, and they're yelling, "Choose we, Laertes shall be king," indicating that perhaps this kingdom is a little bit more democratic than we had thought, or at least less respectful towards the norms of monarchy and how you normally go about selecting kingdoms. The doors have broken through. Laertes enters with his mob. He's very, I guess, gracious towards them. They all want to storm in together, and he says, "No, just let me go in and let me talk by myself with the king." And he comes in all just hellfire. He says, "Oh, thou vile king, give me my father." We want to compare this to Hamlet's kind of, "Oh, yes, I'm going to revenge my dad." And then, "Oh, wait, should I suicide? Because I'm feeling kind of sad about this." And then he's just back and forth whereas Laertes in comparison is just one color of revengeness or, rage and anger through here. While he's demanding this, I want to call attention to Gertrude, who, in 4 different instances here, tries to protect Claudius. So, whatever her knowledge about Claudius's actions toward her first husband, she's standing by her man. She tells Laertes to calm down. There are 2 references in King Claudius's speech right here to let Laertes go. He's addressing Gertrude and saying, stop trying to come between Laertes and myself. And when Laertes asks, "Where's my father?" the king immediately responds in a very, very straightforward matter, "Dead." And the queen quickly points out, "But it wasn't his fault." Claudius is in a really tricky and tenuous political situation here. Remember, he's already aware that he's not a popular, beloved king in the country because he's worried about the effect of Hamlet's disappearance on his followers. He worries that Laertes has enough support to overthrow him. And all he's really going on is his wits and his ability to try to maintain control of the throne, because as far as we can tell, there's no reason why Laertes doesn't just order all of his supporters to say, "All right, off with this king's head," or just kick him out. "I'm now the king." Apparently, his popularity is such that it would trump even Hamlet's claim to the throne. So Laertes kind of takes on this brave gambit here by saying, there's divinity, there's God that protects a king. So let him do what he wants. Let him talk. I'm going to be straight and honest with him and say, your father's dead. Let him ask me whatever he wants. I'll be honest. Again, Laertes' response filled with fire and rage, and he swears that he'll be revenged most throughly for Polonius. Whatever Polonius was like toward Laertes apparently is different from the impression that Hamlet and really the rest of the audience had towards Polonius. For whatever reason, this father inspired a lot of devotion and loyalty in Laertes. Laertes, when questioned by the king, clarifies that he only wants to kill his enemies and not people who might be friends of Polonius. And the king is subtly trying to manipulate him away from getting revenge against the whole world and pointing it towards a most convenient target for Claudius. Like, whom can we blame for this? Because it's true, and also because it's politically convenient for me. At this point, however, Ophelia enters. Laertes speaks this whole time. He's narrating her entrance, and the thing we should notice about this is that Ophelia's mental illness is immediately visible to him. She doesn't have to say a word. Presumably, she looks bedraggled, clothes are dirty, disheveled, in a mess, her hair might be flying all over the place, but she has clearly lost her wits' end, and this section here involves Laertes describing how strange it is that a young woman's mental state should be as mortal and easily to kill as an old man's life. Ophelia is still singing kind of ominous songs about dead people, and then she offers flowers. Apparently, she's holding a bunch of flowers in her hand to various cast characters. There's no specific blocking listed here, but if you check, for example, the No Fear Shakespeare, you may see some translations for what these different kinds of flowers and plants symbolize or represent. There's one in particular that's really a negative symbolism with the flower, and she's presumably handing that to Claudius, because there's nobody else for whom it makes sense for her to give that to. So there's a symbolism with these flowers. More songs about a dead man. This time there's no confusion between Hamlet and Polonius. It seems this is pretty clearly about her dad. The king makes the bold gambit of here saying, "Look, let me make you a deal. You can choose your wisest friends. Let them hear my side of the story and judge. If they find that I am in any way responsible, My kingdom is yours. I'll give it to you. Remember again, Laertes could have just taken this, but the king makes this act and comes across sounding gracious and completely willing to throw himself at Laertes' mercy if Laertes will just hear him out. Back to Horatio, who must have left this to receive this FedEx package from gentlemen. He's got a letter that came from the sea somehow. I don't know how mail went from Hamlet on a boat to Horatio before Hamlet could actually reach Horatio. Yeah, don't ask me. However, lots of stuff going on here. There are pirates, there's seafaring action, there's the capturing of a crew, and Hamlet being taken captive aboard the pirates' place, but they are presumably letting him go free when they return to Denmark, probably because he told them, I'm a prince and my head's worth a lot of money, and I'll make sure you get paid if you just transport me back to Denmark alive. This is a pretty detailed scene, and I imagine that the only reason why all of this is happening in Horatio's words in this letter rather than enacted in the play is it'd be a lot of trouble for something that could just be told like this. I'll admit, though, from a scripting perspective, it's a little bit clumsy, and yeah, a movie version might be much more tempted to play that whole out. All right, last scene of Act 4. Laertes has a question. He says, tell me why you did not do something to Hamlet after he killed my dad. King clarifies, or really reiterates, 2 reasons for this. First off, the queen, his mom, loves him a lot, and I love her, and because of that, I could not do anything that would break her heart. He could be sincere here, he could be just making this up, but it seems quite likely that Queen does care this deeply about Hamlet, and we can't rule out the possibility that Claudius also loves his queen deeply. Second reason he's also mentioned is that Hamlet is super politically popular, and the public would be mad if I did something against him. Laertes points out, but I have anger and pain and rage. I've lost dad, and now I've lost my sister's sanity. While the king's trying to calm him down, another messenger arrives. Apparently Hamlet was really busy with the letter writing, and it's a very straightforward letter just saying, by the way, I've got an interesting story. Cool thing happened on the way to England, but I'll tell you more about it in person when I get back here soon. There's no real tricks, no play within a play or ulterior scheming here. Hamlet seems pretty much just eager to get it over with and just come on and face his fate. Probably related to that soliloquy we saw a little while back. So the king begins to manipulate Laertes a little bit more towards his plan. He describes this one trait of Laertes that apparently inspired a lot of jealousy on Hamlet's part. And what this involves through this long section is basically Laertes good with swords, Hamlet apparently jealous. Because of this, the king has an idea, but first he plays with fire by asking Laertes, did you really love your dad? I mean, this is the kind of thing with Laertes' temperament that could easily lead to violence and bloodshed. So Laertes is understandably taken aback by this, and the king quickly points out, no, I'm not saying that you didn't love your dad, but how far are you willing to go to prove you're your dad's son? And Laertes says, I'd be willing to cut my victim's throat in the church. I would be willing to murder in God's house, which is kind of ironic because you recall that Hamlet himself had that chance. And Claudius and Laertes, at least from their words here, seem to indicate a willingness to do that which Hamlet couldn't or wouldn't do when Claudius says, no place indeed should provide a sanctuary for murder. You should absolutely kill a man in church, kill him in front of his mom or his little 5-year-old or whatever. Revenge and murder, you have to come ready to play. So let's talk our plan. We got several murder options, and we're going to use all of them in this plan. First murder option, we're going to use that jealousy that Hamlet has towards your sword fighting skills. Arrange a practice duel, and, oh, by the way, you're going to win that duel and stab him with a sword. Laertes says, I like this plan, but let me tell you about this cool poison that I happened to buy. You know, when I was off in college, I buy poison like you do. And I want to dip my sword into this poison so that way, even if I don't stab him too badly, he'll die pretty quickly because it's a cool poison, like I said. Totally bought this for cheap somewhere. King says, okay, that's also good. Let's do those, but also add murder option 3, where when he gets tired and sweaty, I'll call for a break and offer him a cup of wine, which we'll guess what it has on there. It's got poison, right? We'll have all these ready to go, so when he arrives, we'll be triply sure he's dead. Gertrude enters to tell us, sadly, that Ophelia has died. Killed herself, specifically to be exact, but these references here, if you're curious, check them out. I'd say tvtropes.org is probably the best place to go to look up what these mean. But the short version is, as a character, she seems really ill-served and mostly in traditional analysis has been viewed as this plot device to demonstrate Hamlet's, I guess, journey. And in more modern kind of analyses, we've seen this as an unfair view of her because she's one of the two major female characters in the play, and she's got a lot of suffering going on. And you could make a pretty strong argument, really, that she's probably the most innocent of the victims of everyone in this play. Gertrude describes a lot of the scenery and details of the riverbank by which Ophelia drowned herself. I don't know how Gertrude knows these details. Either she's got a really descriptive eye for just mentioning things that she heard about, or she was actually there, which seems unlikely. But the details, the sordid details, involve Ophelia lying in the river, letting the weight of her dress eventually drag her down while she does nothing to resist the inevitable drowning. And all the while, she's also singing old songs doing this. Like, she went out really just unhesitatingly and very just openly towards embracing death, which, compared to Hamlet again, seems to indicate, again, who's the real victim here, right? So Ophelia is our next character to die in this play. Laertes is now doubly resolved to get his revenge, and he exits. Claudius points out, man, I just calmed him down, and now he's all on fire again. Let's get this all set. And that's Act 4.